It was supposed to be another reflective Life's Truths and Lies segment, where Ellen explored the white lies, social fibs, and harmless deceptions that people carry through life, the kind of gentle dishonesty that makes social interaction bearable. These conversations often revealed charming human quirks, amusing family secrets, or endearing attempts to spare others' feelings. But when Ellen stopped in front of 80-year-old Evelyn Thompson in the fifth row and asked what seemed like a light-hearted question about life's biggest lies, she had no idea she was about to witness one of the most heartbreaking revelations about love, deception, and the devastating weight of living a lifetime based on a fundamental misunderstanding. Evelyn's answer would shatter every assumption about marriage, devotion, and the courage it takes to love someone who never loved you back, exposing a truth so painful that it had taken 60 years and a death to be acknowledged. Evelyn sat with the dignified posture of someone who had spent 8 decades perfecting the art of maintaining appearances, wearing a navy blue dress with a small pearl brooch, her silver hair styled in the kind of elegant waves that spoke of weekly salon appointments and careful attention to presentation. Her hands, folded neatly in her lap, bore a simple gold wedding band that caught the studio lights, a symbol that had defined her identity for 6 decades. But behind her composed smile was something Ellen couldn't quite identify, a carefully controlled sadness that seemed to emanate from very deep places. "Hello there, beautiful." Ellen approached Evelyn with her characteristic warmth, immediately sensing something complex in this elegant woman's demeanor. "What's your name?" "Evelyn Thompson," she replied, her voice carrying the refined cadence of someone from a generation that valued proper speech. "I'm 80 years old, from Pasadena." "Evelyn Thompson from Pasadena. You look absolutely stunning. Is this your first time at the show?" Evelyn nodded, a genuine smile touching her lips. "Yes, my granddaughter insisted I come. She said it would be good for me to get out more, since," her voice trailed off slightly, "since my husband passed away last year." Ellen's expression softened with sympathy. "I'm so sorry for your loss, Evelyn. 60 years of marriage, that must have been quite a love story." Something flickered across Evelyn's face, too quick for most to notice, but Ellen caught it. A shadow of something that looked like pain mixed with irony. "Yes," Evelyn said carefully, "quite a story indeed." Ellen sensed there was more beneath the surface, but moved forward with her planned question. "Evelyn, we're talking about life's biggest lies today, the fibs we tell, the white lies that get us through social situations. What would you say is the biggest lie you've ever told?" Ellen expected the usual responses she heard from guests Evelyn's age, telling someone their casserole was delicious when it wasn't, fibbing about their age, or perhaps claiming to remember someone they'd forgotten. She was prepared to laugh along with whatever harmless deception this proper lady might share. Evelyn looked directly into Ellen's eyes, and something shifted in her expression. The careful composure she'd maintained cracked slightly, revealing depths of pain that 60 years hadn't diminished. "The biggest lie I've ever told," Evelyn said quietly, her voice carrying the weight of decades, "is that I had a happy marriage. For 60 years I told everyone, my children, my friends, my family, that Harold and I were deeply in love, but the truth is he never loved me, not for a single day in 60 years. The silence that followed was profound. Ellen felt like the studio had shifted on its axis. This wasn't a harmless social lie. This was a confession about a lifetime built on a foundation of one-sided love. "Evelyn," Ellen said softly, moving closer to her. "What do you mean?" Evelyn's hands trembled slightly as she reached into her purse and pulled out a tissue, though her eyes remained dry, as if she'd cried all the tears she had for this particular pain. "After Harold died last year, I was going through his belongings, and I found his journals, decades of them, hidden in his workshop, and I read them all." Evelyn's voice was steady, but Ellen could hear the controlled devastation beneath her words. "What did you find in those journals?" "The truth. The truth I'd spent 60 years trying to ignore or explain away." Evelyn took a deep breath, as if preparing to share a secret that had been suffocating her. "Harold wrote about his life, his thoughts, his feelings. And in 60 years of entries, he never once wrote about loving me, not once." Ellen felt her heart breaking for this dignified woman who was revealing such profound pain with remarkable composure. "Evelyn, what did he write about?" "He wrote about duty, about obligation, about how marriage in 1962 was what men did when they reached a certain age. He wrote about the woman he'd really loved, someone named Catherine who married someone else before he met me. He wrote about how he settled for me because I was suitable and would make a good wife and mother." The studio was completely silent. Ellen could see tears in the eyes of audience members who were absorbing the magnitude of what Evelyn was sharing. He wrote about feeling trapped, about wishing he could have been honest about not wanting to marry anyone since he couldn't marry Catherine. But his parents expected it, society expected it, and Evelyn's voice cracked slightly, I made it so easy for him by loving him so much that he didn't have to pretend to love me back. Ellen sat down on the floor beside Evelyn's chair, abandoning all television protocol. This conversation was too important for distance, too sacred for standing.
Evelyn, how long did you suspect this?
Part of me always knew, Evelyn admitted. In 60 years of marriage, he never once told me he loved me, unless I said it first. He never initiated affection, never seemed disappointed when I went to visit my sister for weeks at a time. He was kind, responsible, a good provider, but there was always this wall between us that I told myself was just his personality. Ellen was struggling to process the implications of what Evelyn was sharing. Evelyn, did you ever confront him about this? Did you ever ask him directly? Evelyn shook her head. I was too afraid of the answer. And by the time I might have been brave enough, we had children, grandchildren, a whole life built on this foundation. I convinced myself that love could be one-sided and still be meaningful. And now, after reading his journals, now I know that I lived 60 years loving a man who saw me as a pleasant roommate he was obligated to care for. Evelyn's voice carried no self-pity, just the flat recognition of a devastating truth. I wasted my entire adult life pouring love into someone who was incapable of returning it. Ellen felt tears forming in her eyes. Evelyn, I don't think you wasted anything. The love you gave was real, even if it wasn't returned the way you deserved. But Ellen, don't you see? I could have had a different life. I could have found someone who actually wanted to be with me, not just someone who was resigned to being with me. I could have experienced what it felt like to be truly wanted, not just tolerated. Ellen stood up and addressed the entire studio. Ladies and gentlemen, Evelyn is sharing something incredibly painful and brave with us. She's talking about the difference between being loved and being settled for, and the heartbreak of discovering that difference too late to change anything. Ellen returned to Evelyn, sitting back down beside her. Evelyn, can I ask you something? Despite learning this painful truth, do you regret the love you gave? Evelyn thought about this carefully. That's the cruelest part, Ellen. I can't regret it, because that love was real for me. It shaped who I am, how I raised my children, how I moved through the world. My love was genuine, even if his wasn't. But it hurts to know it was one-sided. It hurts to know that all those years when I felt lucky to be married to him, he was feeling trapped by his obligations to me. It hurts to know that when I thought we were building a life together, he was just going through the motions of a life he never really wanted. Ellen felt a surge of both anger and profound sympathy. Evelyn, what did his journal say about you as a person? How did he see you? He wrote that I was perfectly nice and tried hard to make him happy. He wrote that I was a good mother and that he respected me. But Ellen, respect isn't love. Gratitude isn't love. Tolerance isn't love. Ellen was quiet for a moment, absorbing the full impact of Evelyn's revelation. Evelyn, have you told anyone else about what you discovered? No one. My children think their father adored me. My friends still talk about what a perfect marriage we had. How could I tell them that it was all a performance on his part? How could I shatter their memories of their father? Ellen understood the impossible position Evelyn was in, carrying this devastating knowledge alone to protect others from the same pain she was experiencing. Evelyn, what's it been like, carrying this secret for a year? Lonely, so incredibly lonely. For 60 years I at least believed I was part of something, even if it felt incomplete. Now I know I was in it alone the entire time, and I'm still alone, but now I know why. Ellen made a decision that would define this moment. Evelyn, I want to tell you something, and I want everyone watching to hear this too. Ellen stood up and walked to the center of her stage area. Evelyn Thompson loved her husband completely for 60 years. That love was real, it was powerful, it was beautiful. The fact that it wasn't returned doesn't diminish its value, it actually makes it more extraordinary. Ellen looked directly at Evelyn. You loved someone without conditions, without guarantees, without reciprocation. That's not foolishness, Evelyn. That's the purest form of love that exists. But I wasted my life, Evelyn protested. You didn't waste your life. You demonstrated that love doesn't require a return on investment to be meaningful. You showed your children what commitment looks like. You created a stable home. You loved someone who needed to be loved, even if he couldn't acknowledge that need. Ellen returned to Evelyn and took her hands. Evelyn, Harold may not have loved you the way you loved him, but his inability to love deeply was his loss, not your failure. Evelyn looked up at Ellen with something that might have been hope. Do you really believe that? I believe that your love was not wasted. I believe that loving someone who can't love you back is one of the most generous things a human being can do. I believe that you gave a man 60 years of devotion, and even if he couldn't appreciate it fully, it made his life better than it would have been without you. Ellen addressed the audience again. Ladies and gentlemen, we live in a world that tells us love is only valuable if it's returned equally. But Evelyn just showed us that the capacity to love deeply, even without reciprocation, is one of the most beautiful qualities a person can have. But Ellen, Evelyn said, what about the lie? What about telling everyone we were happy when we weren't? Evelyn, you weren't lying about your happiness. You were happy, in your way. You were happy to love him. You were happy to build a life around that love. The fact that his experience was different doesn't make your experience false. Ellen made another decision. Evelyn, I want to do something for you. I want to help you understand that your story isn't over. At 80 years old, you still have chapters to write that are entirely your own. What do you mean? Ellen looked directly into the camera. Evelyn, you spent 60 years loving someone else. Now it's time to learn to love yourself with that same devotion. We're going to connect you with grief counselors who specialize in complicated loss and with support groups for people who've discovered difficult truths about their relationships. But Ellen had something else in mind. And Evelyn, I want you to consider something. Your story could help other people who are in one-sided relationships, who are questioning whether their love is being returned, who need to hear that their capacity to love isn't diminished by someone else's inability to receive it. Evelyn was quiet for a long moment. You think other people have experienced this? I think there are thousands of people who need to hear that loving someone who can't love you back doesn't make you foolish, it makes you human. And brave, and generous. Ellen knelt beside Evelyn one more time. Evelyn, the biggest lie you thought you told was about having a happy marriage. But maybe the biggest truth you can tell now is that love itself, the act of loving, can be its own form of happiness, even when it's not returned. Evelyn smiled for the first time since she'd started sharing her story. I never thought of it that way. Your love was real, Evelyn. Your 60 years of devotion were real. Harold's inability to return that love was his limitation, not your failure. As the segment concluded, and Ellen hugged Evelyn, a long, genuine embrace that honored the profound courage it had taken to share this devastating secret, the audience rose in sustained applause. But this wasn't applause for entertainment. It was recognition of a woman who had just transformed her story from one of waste and deception to one of extraordinary generosity and grace. 6 weeks after the episode aired, the impact was profound. Ellen received thousands of letters from viewers who had recognized their own experiences in Evelyn's story, people who had loved without reciprocation, who had questioned the value of their one-sided devotion, who had felt ashamed of their capacity to love deeply without receiving love in return. Evelyn became an unexpected advocate for people in complicated relationships, speaking at support groups about the difference between loving and being loved, and about finding value in the love you give rather than the love you receive. 3 months later, Ellen received a letter from Evelyn, written on beautiful stationery and careful handwriting. Ellen, you taught me that I didn't live a lie for 60 years. I lived a truth that only I could see. My love was real, and that makes it valuable, regardless of whether Harold could appreciate it. I'm learning to be proud of my capacity to love, rather than ashamed of my husband's inability to love me back. Thank you for helping me understand that the story of my marriage isn't about what I didn't receive, it's about what I was brave enough to give. Ellen featured Evelyn's follow-up story in a later segment, showing how her perspective on her marriage had transformed from shame about being unloved to pride in her ability to love unconditionally. Evelyn's story became a beacon for anyone who had ever questioned the value of unrequited love, proving that the capacity to love deeply is never wasted, never foolish, never meaningless, even when it's not returned in equal measure. Because sometimes an 80-year-old woman's confession about the biggest lie of her life can teach the world that love doesn't require reciprocation to be meaningful, that generous hearts are not foolish hearts, and that sometimes the most beautiful love stories are not about being loved back, but about having the courage to love completely regardless of what you receive in return. Evelyn proved that 60 years of one-sided love is not a tragedy. It's a testament to the extraordinary capacity of the human heart to give without conditions, to hope without guarantees, and to find meaning in the act of loving itself, even when that love remains forever unreturned.